Hey guys, this is Jacolia of Jacolia Gems. Thank you for once again coming back to view my channel. For those of you that are returning, welcome back home, family. To my new viewers, I definitely hope that you hear something on today that will persuade you to hit that subscribe button. Do me a favor, you guys. Like the video, comment down below, share this to your social media platforms with your family. It is time that we wake up, everyone around the diaspora. Let's get straight into today's video. I'm coming back with more information on Christopher Columbus, and I love using him as an example to line up the biblical narrative to the West African tribes, to the Sephardic Jews all around the diaspora, as well as those whom have remained in Africa. I love finding out more about history, and also that a lot of us have a great amount of native ancestry, and that many of us, just a small amount of our ancestors truly came from on the other side. And I'll get into that in a totally different video. With that being said, I have my notebook on today because there's some information that was not in the other video that I was just like, okay, I have to go in depth with this in this particular video. I'm going to link the other one down below. It was talking about Christopher Columbus going into West Africa, into what is now Ghana, where the Portuguese, who were known to be the blacker of the Sephardic Jews, went in there as well, how he was doing these expeditions before the expulsion of the Jews in 1492, and also how he was born in a hotbed of where the Sephardic Jews were at in Italy. I went into some stuff, so just watch the video, okay, you guys? With that being said, Christopher Corombo, Corombo, and that spelling is very important. It's important to know that Oromo were a Cushitic people. The Oromo were Cushitic people located in the Horn of Africa. Now, although Christopher Columbus was a Sephardic Jew, we need to know that a lot of black people called themselves Nubian. This was and is a derogatory term for Cushitic people, and the majority of us are not Cushites. When you look at Cushitic people, this is where you have your Ethiopians. This is where you have your Darwinians. And the Cushites and the Bantu were known to be amongst one another. In fact, when you begin to look into the Bible, the Most High, Yod-Heh-Wav, began to say, are you not as the Ethiopian, as the Cushite to me? Describing how we begin to look in our complexion. So these people lived amongst each other a lot. And it's also important to know that the Cushites are Afro-Asiatic, so the linguistics are the same, are very, very similar. So that's why the correlations in who these people group are, where they were located at, is still important to know in comparison to the Sephardic Jews, seeing as if they share linguistic markers and some cultural markers as well. And to know that the Assyrians were founded by a Cushite, and according to the book of Isaiah, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and the Hebrews are Yod-Heh-Wav's peoples, his handiwork. So let's begin to continue. I needed to explain that, and it's important to even know about them being on the Horn of Africa. That's North Africa, where we know the Sephardic Jews were as well. Oromo has been linked to the word gala. A lot of things that we do are African in its core. The word gala literally means to wander or to go home. Christopher Corombo It means to go home. Now, I want you guys to be able to gather this in its fullness, because Christopher Columbus was doing those expeditions in the 1400s into West Africa. He was known to do 4 trips over here into the Americas. And according to historians, they stated that he was looking for the East Indies. As I have stated before in other videos, we need to know that the ancients would describe the world as 3 Indies, 3 Ethiopias, 3 Ethiopias. And it's because the Kushites, they started off majority of these dynasties. This is when black people ruled the earth. We also need to know that with them looking for the East, it's so important when it comes to where they went after they left from over there. They went into the eastern United States. And that's something. Hold on to that. And so Oromo, Oromo is never used as it is deemed offensive. I have a habit of rolling my R's. Spanish is like other. Okay, so I do. It's a habit of rolling my R's. My bad, y'all. It is deemed offensive, so they really don't use it. But it also means free-born people. Y'all, I cannot wait to talk to you guys about what I have found out about my ancestors in correlation with this. All of your ancestors weren't slaves. Some of them were born free as farmers, as sharecroppers, buyers, traders, linguistics. You need to research. Then you even need to know that some of your ancestors were indentured by their own parents and they kept the money themselves. Then some of them were actually sold into chattel slavery. Undeniably so. And so aroma derives from aroma, which means orma, which means sons of strangers, or it can simply mean stranger or man or son of man. You guys, how many scriptures? And son of man literally just means sons of Adam, son of Adam, human. The word Bantu, which is an identification marker for the Hebraic tribes in West Africa, literally means people. It means human. When Yeshua Bar Yosef, our ancestor, described himself as son of man, he was son of Adam. That's who his genealogy traced through Joseph. Let's continue. Ethiopia is also a hotbed for Jews, you guys. Let me tell y'all, we gonna sprinkle in like a little story time. When I was in North Carolina not too long ago, and I was with my baby cousin, I was with Boo, and it was a couple of gentlemen that we were having a conversation with, and as soon as I saw this young man come from around the corner, I said to myself, he's Ethiopian. He's a Cushite. And I said, I'm about to talk to him about his people. I'm about to see if he, like, what can he tell me? What can he teach me about his people? So we're talking. And I say to him, I said, I got a question. And he was like, what? Mind you, he doesn't have an accent. I said, are your people Ethiopian? And his eyes got really big. And he asked me how I knew. And I was like, well, just looking at your features, I can tell. I said, do you guys teach that you're the tribe of Judah or the tribe of Dan? And his eyes got really big. He was like, whoa, what? He was like, how you know about that? And I laughed. And I was like, well, which do you teach? And he said, most people describe them as the tribe of Dan. But he grew up knowing that they're the tribe of Judah. And I said, yeah, because you guys also went into Jamaica. And a lot of people venerate Selassie. And he began to say that he has issue with Selassie, and I asked him why, and he was like, oh, because people made a Messiah out of him. I said, did they not do the same thing with Christ? We've always had messianic figures in the Black community. It does not mean to place them and equate them with Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh. Did they not do that with Joseph? Did they not do that with Moshe? Did not people do that with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? And Black people have always looked for their savior. But when we began to talk about the Cushitic connection and the differentiation between the Cushites and the Israelites whom were seated in that land, and some oral traditions begin to say from the Cushitic queen Sheba and Solomon. That's not in the biblical narrative, but that's in the oral tradition of the Ethiopians. And some Ethiopians, actually, if you look at Nipsey Hussle's last name, it would be suggested based on the linguistics of his last name that he is actually an Edomite, because his name goes back into Edom linguistically. And we have to know that all of us can look just alike but have different cultures at our very, very root. And so Judah, it's very important to know that Judah and Benjamin, when they went into captivity, that they became indistinguishable amongst one another. And the reason that this is important to know in conjunction with Christopher Columbus is because when he went into Ghana, the Akan state that they are Judah. There's also some Benjamin among the Akan. And I just suggest on researching the Akan of West Africa, and I'm going to link a video once again from First Resurrection Israelite Ministry under the tutorship of Pastor Lenny. He's a historian, he's a librarian, he majored in history, he majored in social science. I actually had the pleasure of knowing a young lady, knowing of a young lady named Hannah, whom happens to be Akan. And I have an associate who still lives in Ghana, and this is what they grow up knowing. So when you begin to look into the Akan, according to their oral tradition, specifically the Ashanti, because if you look at T, and I've stated this before, T means of, it also means people, which goes back into the Bantu. But when you take it back to Mesopotamia, it means rib. And this is Hava, the biblical Eve, which is a very popular name in West Africa. When we began to look at the Akan, they have something by the name of the Golden Stool. And I'll link a video down below explaining about the Golden Stool. Is basically identical to the Ark of the Covenant. They circumcise on the 8th day. They believe in having the dowry and baptisms and the 13-month calendar. It's Hebraic marker after Hebraic marker. So when you look at the name Ashan, and it means people, and leading back to, Adam and everything, but the name, with a T, but the name Akan in the Bible is from the tribe of Judah. And Judah and Benjamin became inseparable in Babylonian captivity. So you also will begin to have in the Cushitic thing, and the story about the young man that I met in North Carolina begins to line up with this. Because when you begin to look at the Coromante in Jamaica, Coromant, is this not linguistically lining up with Christopher Columbus's last name, as well as the Oromo in Ethiopia? So when you look at the Coromante Jamaicans, they rebelled against the Dutch, the Portuguese, and Persuasions. They began to have so many revolutions that was not even talked about. Because if they begin to tell us how many of our ancestors fought back, it could cause an uprising. So when you look at the Coromante Jamaicans, these are part of the Akan. When you begin to look into these revolutions that began to take place, these slave revolts that began to take place, they actually began to hang us by our ribs from the gallows. And when we began to look at the Babylonian and the Persian captivity, this happened to our people before. See, I'm reminded of my ancestry, my Afro-Iranian ancestry, when it comes to this in particular through my great-great-great-grandfather. He came over here as a free man in 1848 on a boat from Iran into Mississippi, and his paperwork was naturalized. He was classified originally as a mulatto and then as Negro. And I mention him because it is a known fact in the biblical narrative that Judah and Benjamin were in Babylonian captivity. Judah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 3 Hebrew boys. Y'all love that story. And then you became, what, bilingual to learn the Aramaic. And he translated for King Nebuchadnezzar. Persian captivity with Esther and Mordecai, who were Benjamites. And in the time of Persia, she went in. Thank you so much, Ruach. She went in as a hidden one amongst the Persians, because the Persians were Hebraic people as well through Elam. Same customs, a lot of the same things. She had to reveal her own identity to save her people because she blended in with the order of the day. But what did they have to punish the Jews in that time for not following the edicts and not bowing down? According to King Xerxes' edicts at that time, they had gallows to hang the Israelites. And we see this in history in the diasporas with the Coromante. I told y'all I was going to tie it all together. If you pay attention, I'm going to tie it all together. So the Afro-Iranians, the Benjamites, and the Judites who was in Persia, where did they come from, you guys? East Africa, that's Eden. Tanzania, Zanzibar, that's the land of the black. And if you look over there today, and I cannot wait to go back home over there, it's islands, it's lush, it's beautiful, it's East Africa. And the Arabs would go over into East Africa to begin to take these Bantu, these Afro-Arabs, and these Cameronos, and resell them and sell them into slavery in the Sahel, in Saudi Arabia. The Arabic slave trade was atrocious. This is how our people became Islamic. And even before then, we're going to do a video about Muhammad and who was talking to him. And so when we began to follow the Israelites in connection with the slave narratives, in connection with the West African tribes, we'll begin to see something. When I began to mention the expulsion of the Jews and the West African tribes, guess what else is very important to know about these West African tribes? We're going to talk about the Yoruba. And the reason we're going to talk about the Yoruba is because they are known to be part of the Northern Kingdom Sephardic Jews. According to their oral tradition and their history, they fled from Morocco and Spain into West Africa. Their language is a mixture of Maharabi Arabic. I just had to force myself not to throw that R. Maharabi Arabic and Negro speech. That's what they say. What's Negro speech? Bantu. Oh, you guys, we have some linguistic markers and identifications for the Ashanti language. Their word Abu or Yaba means father. Abba means father in Hebrew. Their word Imu means mother. Ima means mother in Hebrew. And I'm going to just stop right there. 2 witnesses. I'm going to just stop right there. You guys could go do that deep digging, right? And when you begin to look into the Yoruba and their oral tradition, from them fleeing from Morocco to Spain, their linguistics, does this not line up into what the Israelites did? The Jews did. They fled Morocco and Spain, and they went into West Africa. The Ashanti became the people of smoke. That's what their name means, because according to their oral tradition, they saw the temple fall in 70 AD. There are about 9 different Israelite tribes broken down in India in itself. And one of them in particular are half of the tribe of Manasseh. And they say that they fled there after 70 AD. We're going to talk about where the other Manasseh tribe is. Let's talk more about the Yoruba, whom are seen with the Akan. And guess where the Yoruba are at in more place than anywhere else in the diaspora? The same place that the old Christians who had no type of Israelite or Arabic ancestry were able to come into the New World. The same place where our people made forgeries to say that they were not Sephardic Jews and Moors, and they began to pass themselves off as white, or say that they have all the way converted to Catholicism. Oh, they fled and they went into Brazil, where the Portuguese were Sephardic Jews. They went into Brazil, where the second largest Negro population is today. That's where you get your BBL from. But guess who are heavily located in Brazil? The Yoruba. Now, it's important to know that with the Yoruba, that there are Canaanite tribes amongst them too. Some of them say that they come from Ham, specifically Nimrod. And Nimrod was a what? Cushite, which begins to prove what I began to say in the beginning, that Cushites and Bantus ran and beat amongst one another a lot. They say that their autonomous ancestor is Oduduwa. The rest of them have been identified by Native Africans as Yol, I think it's Yol Kwam. I'll put it down below. Emo Yol Kwam, meaning sons of the stranger, sons of the strange people. Is this not the same thing that the Oromo means? But the Yoruba identify themselves as Benai Ephraim, sons of Ephraim. You see how Benai in Yoruba means the same thing as Benai in Hebrew, and how they identify themselves as the sons of Ephraim, and they're in the diaspora in Brazil amongst these Sephardic Jews. It's also very important to know that when you begin to look at the Koshin Jews in India, those are the ones who say that they fled in 70 AD. They live on their own islands autonomously. And when you look into their marketplaces, guess what people groups, cultures you begin to see? The British. Did not the Sephardic Jews have conversations and conversos with Britain? Were not the Native Americans sold to Britain? You see the Portuguese, which were known to be Sephardic Jews, the blacker of the Sephardic Jews. It says Jewish, Israelite, and it says Hindu. Where does the Hindu feature come in from? The Persian captivity. Zoroastrianism. And how can we say this? Because the Benjamites were in Persian captivity. The Benjaminites in Judah became basically one and the same. And if the Akan fled into parts of West Africa in 70 AD, and then some of them began to flee into India, they're having the same stories in different places, while keeping similar customs and knowing exactly who they are. It's very important to also know that when we look at the book of Esther, that Esther's name was originally Hadassah. That's her Hebrew name. And the book of Esther is also a book that is historically questioned by some scholars for several reasons. Esther was renamed and given a Babylonian name after the goddess Ishtar. When you look at Daniel and the 3 Hebrew boys, their names were changed from Hebrew to Babylonian. If they could change our name, take our culture, whitewash our history, take our language, force us to convert. Oh, it's important. It's a word. It's a word, y'all, that I want to find. I'm going to find it. 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 Because when I found it, it blew my mind. And it's a Hebrew word. And it literally meant to rape, to forcibly convert. Whoever speaks Hebrew, you know what word I'm talking about. It's the converso in Hebrew. Oh, and this is what I almost forgot. So you guys know how Christopher Columbus came across the Tainos, the Native Americans. This is one of the Native American tribes that people believe are Israelites. They spoke Hebrew. They had a lot of the customs, like mind-blowing, right? But the place that the Native Americans were from is spelled Guiahana, basically a derivation of Ghana. And that was mind-blowing to me when I began to look at that. And also when I began to mention them wanting to go to the East, and people were like, oh, Christopher Columbus didn't know what he was doing, didn't know where he was going. Our people were not stupid. They were sellers. They were seafaring people. The Bible talks about the Phoenicians being seafarers and the Israelites being seafarers. We built boats. The Hebrew Native Americans built boats. We sailed. We navigated. We bartered. We traded. So when they were looking for the East, you guys, we have to put our thinking caps on. I'm not talking to y'all like y'all stupid. Like literally last night, I was like, I have to make sense of this thing. I have to make sense of this thing because there's so many different doctrines out there and so many people argue about, oh, you're not African, you really Native American, you're not Native American, you really, you know, like all of these other things, when it's like, we're actually probably all of these things. Speaking for myself, I know I am. When we began to look at where the Sephardic Jews, where the Pilgrims, the Quakers, the Separatists, and the Puritans began to come, when they left from over there and when they left out of Brazil, they went into the east of the United States. And yes, this would be inclusive of New York, New Hampshire, all of those places. But Illinois and Indiana, those places are considered the East United States. And it is not a coincidence that so many of these places have names like Goshen and Palatine and Egypt. All of these biblical names. We have to know that once upon a time, a lot of these land masses were water and our people could sail to one another. A lot of these land masses were connected. Things were closer than we will ever realize and bigger than our eyes will ever see. I hope this video helps somebody out today. Christopher Coromante was going back home to see his people in Ghana with the Akan. The Yoruba was up in there. The Igbo, which we've talked about before. He's making these expeditions, knowing these people before the expulsion of the Jews. He spoke Ladino, which is where you get the word Latino. This is a Latin form of Hebrew that was picked up on in Spain because this is where they were. Latin America was an identification marker of where the Latinos went and where they fled. So if you're Catholic, if you're Christian, if you're Islamic, it was forced up on you, and it is not your religion. It is not your culture. Your people at times willingly practiced these things openly and then privately kept the law, statutes, and commandments not to become martyrs. Because we knew that if we would become martyrs, they would hang us in the gallows. We have to begin to wake up one word at a time. Look into your history. This is nothing strange. This is Jacolia of Jacolia Gems. Thank you for once again coming back to view my channel. Food for thought.